2026 meeting of the Business Operations Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. Hayden, please take a roll call of the commissioners.
Commissioner Lehrman.
Aye.
Commissioner Eddie Smith.
Here.
Chair Carter.
Here.
The chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the commissioners before we begin? There being none, on today's agenda, the Business Operations Committee will hear updates from staff. First, we'll hear from the Executive Director's operational update from Tess Stovall. Then the Commission's Director of Finance and Operations, Lawrence Walker, will present budget updates, including the fiscal year 2025 authorizes fee report, fiscal year 26 Commission's budget update, and the fiscal year 27 budget request update. Do you have any questions or comments on the agenda before we vote to approve? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
It's been properly moved and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the agenda is approved. The minutes of the meeting held on October the 7th, 2025 have been provided. Does anyone have any comments or edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. The first item on our agenda is an operational update from our Executive Director, Tess Stovall. Tess, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Carter. This quarterly update is going to start with an update on staffing. So as a reminder, in FY26, for the FY26 budget, the General Assembly approved 4 new positions for the Commission. That was both for expanding workload that we received through changes to statute that allowed direct applications to the Commission, as well as an original request that we had made to support our growth in terms of our overall portfolio of schools, with current schools at 24 in our portfolio. We've already hired one of those positions this fall, and we're in the process of recruiting and hiring for 2 additional positions. So a federal programs coordinator that's going to be under the school programs and supports team, and then a manager of grants and fiscal monitoring who's going to take over the management of all of our state and federal grants. We hope to fill those positions in the first quarter of 2026 to support our schools and our agency. That would leave 1 remaining open position for the Commission. Next, we are in the process of the FY27 budget approval process with the General Assembly. We do have our budget hearing scheduled with Senate Education and House Finance coming up in February. And tomorrow, as part of my update, Hayden Pendergrass will give a broader General Assembly update where we can dive more into kind of what to expect about the budget process. And then finally, I want to remind everybody about upcoming 2026 meeting dates. So we're going to be meeting in April here in Nashville. Then our July meeting will be in Knoxville. And then our October meeting will be back here in Nashville. Just for you all to know, we will be polling for 2027 dates after the April meeting. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Eddie.
Well, it wasn't me, I saw them pointing.
I shared, do any of the commissioners have any questions for Tess? So Tess, thank you very much for keeping us updated. The final item on our agenda today are updates on the fiscal year authorizes fee report, fiscal year 26 Commission budget, and the fiscal year 27 budget request from the Director of Finance and Operations, Lawrence Walker. Lawrence, you're recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. Give me 1 second while this pulls back up. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. I'm Lawrence Walker, Director of Finance and Operations. I'll be walking you through some key updates for fiscal year 25 and the coinciding authorizer fee report, an update on the FY26 budget to actuals, our TISA outcomes bonuses, and our FY27 budget request. Materials have been provided for you prior to the meeting. However, I will provide an overview for the committee. For the committee. For the FY25 authorizer fee report and fiscal updates, our authorizer fee report was submitted to the State Board of Education on December 1st, and it was uploaded to our website for the public to view. In FY25, we were able to cover about 97% of our agency expenses with our authorizer fee. Also, 2 of our 3 current geographic districts have submitted FY25 final expenditure reports, and that resulted in an increased per pupil funding amount for those counties. So Memphis-Shelby County increased from $12,249 to $12,445, and then Rutherford County increased from $10,273 to $10,503 per student. Metro Nashville's report has not yet been finalized, and we don't have a timeline as of yet when that will be filed. For the FY26 budget to actuals, the budget to actuals has been updated to reflect our current spending and drawdown reflective of expenditures from July 1st to December 15th. And as you review that budget, please note the following. So number one, as we see every year, projected revenue is extremely volatile. All the revenue figures are adjusted multiple times throughout the year as enrollment and local revenue fluctuate, and as we receive revenue updates from the Department of Education. Additionally, as I stated a moment ago, as our responsibilities grow and we hire additional staff, the agency expenditures will increase. And like you said, we still have 3 additional positions to fill. As of today, we do project the authorizer fee to cover 100% of our expenses. However, please keep in mind that the figures will fluctuate as the year progresses. So for example, since the October meeting, we've received local revenue true-ups and TISA funding adjustments, and as a result, our authorizer fee revenue projections have reduced. That's mostly from the school enrollment and actual ADM fluctuations, but we'll continue to monitor and update the committee on the next meeting. For our TISA outcomes bonuses, the district was awarded approximately $561,000 in TISA outcomes bonuses. That was for student achievement in school year 24-25. The funds are 100% state funded and are calculated by TCAP achievement in grades 3 and 4, and then TCAP achievement in grades 7 and 8. For high school students, it's calculated with a combination of student achievement in EPSO coursework, ACT, and ASVAB testing. And then just note that students can generate bonuses once in elementary school, once in middle school, once in high school. For our FY27 budget request, this is more so of a reminder, but we did submit our official budget request to Finance and Administration in September. That's to be included in the FY27 governor's budget. We are awaiting approval for an additional $22,046,500 in budget authority, and that's going to be to recognize additional revenue and operational expenditures relating to our growing enrollment. So pending the completion of the appeals process, we are expecting to authorize at least 26 schools serving a projected 9,600 plus students. And I'm happy to take any questions or provide any further detail on these items.
Sure. Commissioner?
Sorry, thank you. Lawrence, could you talk about the outcome bonuses? I probably missed this, but like, why is it just based on those grade levels or tests, or does anybody have that information? Did they just pick a couple grades to focus on?
Yeah, the answer is that's either statutorily driven or regulation driven. I can look that up, but yes, it is very, it is outlined within the TISA kind of procedures or statute that outcome bonuses would be based on those specific qualifications, third grade literacy, middle school literacy, and then as well as like high school post-secondary attainment.
Great, thank you.
Are there any additional questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Smith?
And this isn't so much a question, just as something that I just want to highlight, because we've been working, what is this, going on 6 years? But just looking at, bottom line number, if everything holds true today, we actually are now covering what the General Assembly tasked us to do with that 1.419 million of state funds. It's now being covered in the budget. So I just want to say thank you to you and the staff. Tess, great job for you all, because I think that's something that's extremely important, because I know as you all get ready to go in, that's something that you really need to make sure that Senator Watson, that's been a question he's been asking for a few years, and looking at this right this second, we've now hit that point. So just great job to you all.
Thanks, Commissioner Smith. Any other questions from the commissioners? There being none, Lawrence, thank you. Thanks for keeping us updated on the commission's finances. Thank you all for your attendance, and participating at this meeting of the Business Operations Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. At this time, I would like to ask if there are any final comments.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, let me finish, please. I know you want to get out of here, Eddie, but I've got some other script to read, okay? And I don't want to get in trouble by Tess, okay? I'm
not afraid of that.
I am. And I'm older than you, Eddie, so be careful. The next meeting of the Business Operations Committee is scheduled for April 16th, 2026. If there are no further comments, do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Now I'll make the motion. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
Kind of get back in the swing of things.
Yep. All right. Well, I want to personally welcome Commissioner Carter back. It's good to see him in person. We're overjoyed to have you.
A little rusty, but I'm back.
Hey, you got it. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the January 22nd, 2026 meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. You're all probably surprised to see me running the meeting, but Commissioner Patterson notified me of his absence and was excused, and I will be chairing the committee today in accordance with commission policy. Hayden, will you please take a roll call of the commissioners?
Commissioner Griscom. Here. Commissioner Patterson. And Chair Richards.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, the School Performance and Accountability Committee will hear several presentations from staff as well as an amendment petition. First, Accountability Coordinator Rebecca LeBreur will present the SY 24 and 25 annual report. Following that, Deputy Director of Authorizing Maggie Lund and Federal Programs Coordinator Claire Seguin will present on Commission School Intervention. Next, we will hear an amendment petition from Lee Neely's Bend, presented by the Director of Authorizing, Beth Figueroa. Then Maggie Lund will present updates on the Opportunity Public Charter School Performance Framework. And finally, Maggie Lund, Authorizing Coordinator Sophie Binfield-Gilmore, and Director of School Programs and Support Maggie Stampley will provide school year 25-26 updates. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on the agenda before we vote to approve?
Move its approval.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, the ayes have it and the agenda is approved. The minutes from the committee meeting held on October 7th, 2025 have been provided. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed?
Move the approval.
Second. All those in favor of approval say aye. Aye. There aren't any, is anybody else to say no, so the ayes have it and the minutes are approved. Okay, the first item on our agenda is a presentation on the on the school year. I'm going to get this school year. That's why it was system in my old job. So it's school year 24-25 annual report from Rebecca. Rebecca, you are recognized.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, School Performance and Accountability Committee. My name is Rebecca Ladebor. I'm the Data and Accountability Coordinator. I have the privilege this afternoon of sharing an overview of the school year 24-25 annual report that was published on our website in December. So in accordance with statute, all authorizers across the state must publish a report summarizing the results of their schools in their portfolio. All of our reports are available on our website. The following slides are going to overview the Commission's school year 24-25 report. So during last school year, there were 17 schools open and operating under the Commission, serving just over 6,700 students. In the Western Grand Division, we had 7 schools, serving just over 2,600 students. In the Middle Grand Division, there were 10 schools, serving just under 4,200 students. In comparison to previous years, if we want to think back to 21-22, the first official Commission year, we had 4 schools. And in the current school year, we have 24. If we go back again to 21-22, we had about 1,700 students. And in the current school year, we have 8,400 students. So thinking specifically about the 17 schools that were in operation last year, the next few slides are going to overview those results in reference to our school performance framework. We're going to start with a high-level summary. So on your slide, you will see those 17 schools listed alphabetically. Then you're going to see the 3 sections of the school performance framework. We have the academic section, where we had 12 schools meet or exceed standard, the financial section, which is pending while we wait for audits, and the organizational section, where we had 16 schools meet standard. On the next few slides, we are going to dig deeper. For our academic section, we have 4 areas included within the framework. The first is student outcomes. This is aligned to the state letter grade. The second is the mission-specific goal. These are unique to each school. The third is comparative performance, which looks at how that school does in comparison to the resident district. So a school in Nashville serving grades 5 through 8 is compared to Metro Nashville Public Schools, grades 5 through 8. And then TVOS, which is our growth measure. So up first, we have letter grade. The calculation for the letter grade includes a few things. It looks at absolute achievement thresholds. It looks at growth with TVOS. It looks at growth 25, which is the growth of the bottom 25% of students within the school. And then for high school, it also includes college and career readiness. The highlights here are 31% of our schools did earn a letter grade A. This is up from 17% last year. We did have 4 schools earn a letter grade D. Lester Prep had previously been a C. Tennessee Nature Academy and Rocketship Nashville Northeast Elementary, this was their second year as a letter grade D. They have received a notice of concern, and Dr. Lund will be sharing more about that a little bit later this meeting. And then Rutherford Collegiate Prep, which was a year 1 school. We also had 5 reward schools, with 2 of those schools, KIPP Antioch College Prep Middle and Libertas School of Memphis, earning this recognition for the 2nd year in a row. Next, we have mission-specific goals. Again, mission-specific goals are unique to each school. These are created by the schools in alignment with their charter application. So we had 82% of our schools either meet or exceed their goal. Up next is comparative performance. Again, this is looking at how each school does in comparison to its resident district. So Libertas would be in comparison to Memphis Shelby County Schools, KIPP Antioch would be to Metro Nashville Public Schools. We had 69% of our schools across the portfolio meet or exceed the standard. There is more variation when you look by Grand Division, with 80% of the schools in the Middle Grand Division and 50% of the schools in the Western Grand Division meeting standard. Now, comparative performance looks not just at the 4 overall subjects in comparison to the resident district, but then it also looks by subgroup for ELA and math. So you'll find in your packet there is an appendix to this presentation which goes into greater detail about that. I also want to take a moment here and highlight KIPP Antioch College Prep Elementary. This school exceeded the resident district across the board and also exceeded the standard of our academic framework. They earned a perfect score on the academic section. But beyond that, they've also been a really great partner to our other schools, inviting folks in, sharing best practices, and we just really appreciate their partnership and their service to students. The last area is TVOS for the academic section. Here we had 88% of our schools earn a level 3 or higher. That's that light green bar and up. Noting here that schools that earned a level 4 and level 5 exceeded the growth expectations for their students. So this concludes the academic section of the framework. Up next, we have organizational. 16 out of 17 schools met standard. Bluff City High School did not meet. We are continuing to have bi-monthly meetings with...
Mind if I ask a question about that, or
Sure.
you want
Go ahead,
it later?
sir.
Just the, maybe this is obvious to others, but the reward, what's the reward given for?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Reward school status is given to any school that earns a 3.1 or higher on the federal accountability. So these are like the cream of the crop across the state. Really exciting. Glad to see 5 of our schools there. All right. So we're continuing.
And I apologize. Looking at the letter grade outcomes and the mission-specific goal, there's really only 2 schools that hit the bottom category when you look at both of those. What are we doing for those 2 schools to kind of help them get up to speed?
Absolutely. So first off, with Rutherford Collegiate Prep, that is a year 1 school. We had a very candid conversation with them at the end of the school year, and we are looking forward to their site visit, which was intended to be next week, but given the storm, has been pushed back a week. So we're going to continue to lean in there. And then for Rockship Nashville Northeast Elementary, Dr. Lund's going to share more information about that later, as they are going to be starting to move forward with intervention. But again, continued site visits and communications. Speaking of communications, we are continuing our bi-monthly meetings with Bluff City High School in accordance with their intervention status. Now, with organizational, we want to look for trends. Overall, the big headline here is that most indicators are green across the board. We do look a little more closely at some of our few key indicators. These are what we call the canary in the coal mine indicators. And these are ones that we talk about at site visits, we talk about at end-of-year meetings with schools, and we share with our governing boards. Those are student retention, teacher retention, and attendance. For student retention, that's at 70% threshold. We did have 7 schools not meet that threshold. For attendance, this is looking specifically at goals for chronic absenteeism. We had 5 schools that did not meet. And for teacher retention, we had 3 schools that had less than 50%. All of these data points are shared with our schools and are used as points of discussion at our site visits.
So on this one, what is the chronic absenteeism number? What's the percentage number that's in that where they're missing it?
Great question. And so it varies by school. It is based off of their chronic absenteeism rate from the previous year and decreasing it by a certain amount. So for our framework, in order to meet standard, you have to meet that goal Or if you are like our KIPP schools that all had single-digit chronic absenteeism, once you hit below a certain threshold, then you automatically meet.
So if I look at what you've got listed here, what is the percentage of the miss? What's that percentage number? They missing it by 10%, 20%? What's the number we're looking at?
It varies by school, but I can get those specifics for each of those for you, absolutely.
Because just like you say, if you've got this number and you're looking to move to a different number, I'd be interested in where they were and have they gone backwards? Have they not improved? Have they gotten worse? And then we'd really like to know what do they have in place to try to deal with this? Because we've got other schools, as we know, that are dealing with this issue. On the retention, 50%, so that means they've got a 50%
Yes.
teacher turnover?
Yes,
Does this
sir.
also include leadership in the school or just teachers?
This looks at licensed teachers and to the
Okay.
principal.
50%
Yes, sir.
year over year, or is this a trend that you've seen for a couple of years?
For Rutherford Collegiate Prep, this was their year one.
Right. What about NCP?
NCP has been decreasing year over year. For Promise Academy, this was the year that they went through consolidation, so we did expect a fair amount of turnover.
So you may not be about, so when you look at a number, 50% change with teachers, why is that happening? What are you all seeing or hearing? I mean, that's a huge number, half of your faculty changing. So what's the rationale?
We agree. I think one of the things that's important to note is the indicators that are listed here are indicators that we talk in depth at site visits with our schools. So we pull this data and have candid conversations with our schools when we're there for site visits. I also want to note your concerns around NCP, particularly with the 50%. Their interim review is coming up. They had their site visit scheduled for next week that we have now pushed to the following week because of our impending snowstorm. But I do think that I want you to know that some of the questions that we have crafted are really intentional around the numbers that we're seeing, particularly with teacher retention, student retention, and attendance.
So one last question, Christina. So do you see a number that correlates with that teacher retention number with the leadership of the school? Is it also significant changes going on there, or is your leadership team staying in place? There's just some other issues that they're dealing with.
It depends. It depends on the school that you're looking at, and it depends on the situation. We do often, with leadership turnover, tend to see larger turnover with staff and teachers. That tends to be a pretty normal pattern. But there are cases and situations like Rebecca spoke to about Promise Academy and consolidations where you had a certain amount of teachers and now you had to downsize. But I do think that is something that we continue to talk about, and I think in the site visit upcoming, we'll have a lot more concrete answers because those are questions that we craft as part of the site visit and looking at this data to dive in with the operator about what we're seeing.
And if you all are going to get to this, just say, we're going to get to that in a second. Let's talk Bluff City High School for a second, because that's the one that is the only one that did not meet standards on the organizational. I see that they actually, it looks like they've improved academically, which was a major concern of ours, but they're not quite there on the organization. What do you all see? What's the trend line you're seeing for them moving forward? Mostly because that continues to be one of the schools that we are keenly focused on making sure that it is going where we want it to go.
Great question. I can speak to that now. So Bluff City High School did not meet standard on the organizational performance section. There were a few indicators that led us to have this rating due to some kind of ongoing staffing issues that they've had. As you'll remember, some of the things that we've reported in their plan of correction is around staffing for core content areas. And they still, at this time of this performance framework, when we pulled this data, had vacancies in key content areas that if you align to look at the academic scores for those students that tested in that EOC or in that content, were directly aligned to a staffing vacancy. They had lower scores. And so part of the reason we continue to have conversations with that operator as through their plan of correction is around staffing and what support is going to that staff, particularly knowing that there are some key gaps. I will say you're correct. They have made gains, especially for this school year in terms of their academic performance. And we are continuing with their plan of correction as outlined. We'll get to that a little more when we talk about intervention in a later presentation.
Just two quick questions. Do we keep track of regretted versus non-regretted departures, or do we know much about that? The reason I ask is that very different signals can be elicited from that. The second question has to do with the percentage of staff that are not teachers and not a principal, and how do we keep track of turnover in that category?
Great questions. So the way that we calculate teacher retention, if a school has not asked back that staff member, it is not held against them. Like, we want the right people in the right seats, and we're not going to penalize you for asking folks to move along. In terms of staff that are not licensed, we have access to that data through the personnel tracker. It's something that Pam Kimbrough speaks with schools about in their monthly meetings, but it's not something that we formally track, as we decided that our guiding star or guiding principle here is going to be the licensed staff members in the building.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got one. 2 schools are on these indicator trends as failing to meet 3 of them. And the school that did not meet the standard in the report, which is not the indicator trends, it's the absolute performance, is only on 1 of these. Can you help me understand how these indicators tie into the final performance?
Absolutely. So in our organizational section, we have over 20 different indicators. It's not a weighted system because different indicators tell us different things, and there can be a range of reasons why a school may or may not meet that. And so as we go through this process, we sit down as a whole team and discuss all the indicators and understand the totality of the performance. Now, for Bluff City High School in particular, they are not going to meet as a result of their intervention status. That's a direct correlation there. And they also had some key indicators that have been a point of conversation with us over a number of years. These are our canary in the coal mine. So I would imagine that if we see trends continue with the schools that we see on this, then they will also be ones that we talk about more frequently.
Okay, I noticed Bluff City was not meeting 2 of these 3, but unlike a famous song a long time ago, 2 out of 3 ain't bad is not the case here, so. Okay, other questions on this slide?
Could I ask one?
Yes, sure.
Go ahead.
The mission-specific goal, I know we've talked about this before, but could you explain a little bit like how much you guys weigh in on those goals? Because it worries me a little bit that there could be like subjectivity and they're not holding themselves to a high enough standard. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I'm actually going to ask Dr. Lund to lean in here because she's led a lot of really exciting work on how to hold our schools to a really high standard, including creating guidance documents and exercises for them.
Thank you, Rebecca. To directly answer your question around mission-specific goals, these are school-created and school-owned. So they create their mission-specific goals in alignment with what is in their charter application and the mission that they intend to carry out with their students. It is a negotiation process with us around a few key indicators, which Rebecca is referring to a guidance document that we've created around ensuring that schools are choosing goals that are focused on student outcomes. A lot of times it's easy to focus on inputs, and we really want to make sure that our schools are focusing on outcomes of students. But we also want to make sure that they are rigorous and aligned with what they set out to do within their charter application. So that conversation is a key part of the charter agreement process, which Ashley can speak to in more detail because the mission-specific goal lives as an appendix of their charter agreement, so they're held to that. But I do also want to acknowledge that this portion of our framework is the only portion of our framework that is school-reported data. So there is some lack of, oversight that we can have or, control over being able to pull and verify the data. But I do also think it's important to note that the goal that they establish in the beginning is what they're held to for the length of their charter agreement. And so in that way, it is also rigorous. This isn't something that can adjust year over year depending on the school's data. They're held to it when they create it. And so there is some level of rigor and oversight as they're held to it in their agreement, but it is school-reported data.
Let me go back for a second. I want to go back to our original Tom on the committee, that he was starting to ask the question. You said that this isn't a weighted thing, but when I look at that chart, the indicators a second ago, when I look at RCP, they are both on the not making it on the student retention as well as over 50% or 50% on teacher retention. How is it that they're meeting the standards when they are the ones that are falling far below on academic? Like, there seems to be a little disconnect in that they can meet the standards organizationally, but have what I would say is two glaring failures for the school.
I can take that. As Rebecca mentioned, there's 20 indicators plus on the organizational performance section. We bring these up as trends that we're seeing in many schools not meeting. This doesn't necessarily mean that they are not meeting in more of those standards. We share the trends with teacher and student retention and chronic absenteeism, as those are kind of our organizational performance indicators that we have tended to see schools struggle with in recent years. And so we bring those up to share them with you to make sure that you all are aware that we're seeing this across other schools within our portfolio. But that is not the only indicator that we're measuring in terms of organizational performance. There are many, many others that go into the calculation for them in terms of resulting in their meeting of standard. That's a good question.
And I think just to add on, typically within our framework, we give the first year schools somewhat of a hold harmless and kind of set that as our baseline year with clear communication that if those trends continue, then they would not meet standard in those indicators. So if you were to able to double click on some of these organizational sections, you would see that there are indicators underneath where the schools are not meeting the standard because we are seeing 2 or 3 year trends.
Let's move on. Oops. No, we're doing good. This is what this is about, is having a conversation.
So the final section of the framework is financial, and we're waiting. Once we get the audits, we will update it, we'll update the report, and we will update you all as well. Okay, so headlines here are overall, Commission schools are organizationally sound, and the majority are demonstrating academic success. The next few slides are going to highlight, are going to include some of the highlights that we included looking district-wide, not just at the school level. So we're going to zoom out a little bit here and looking across the district. So as a district, the Commission earned exemplary designation as part of the accountability process in the state. Additionally, school year 24-25 was the 4th consecutive year earning a TVOS Level 5 composite as a district. And we've seen that growth in success rates as well. We've found that students who remain in a Commission school year over year demonstrate greater growth in success rates, as shown in this graph. So this graph looks at the success rate in 2023 and in 2025 for both math and ELA, all grades. The cluster of bars on the left represents the statewide success rate growth for all students. This means that the ELA success rate for the state of Tennessee increased by 3 percentage points from 2023 to 2025. The middle cluster of bars is the Commission's success rate growth for all students who attended that year, so calculated in the same way as the state of Tennessee. The right cluster of bars, this is the success rate growth for the students who remained enrolled in a Commission school from 2023 through 2025. So it's different than the first two clusters, which were just all students who tested that year. These are the students who are staying. And we're going to look a little more closely at this idea in the next few slides. It's an analysis that we call time and model. It looks at the performance of students who remain enrolled year over year. We calculate this district-wide and by school. We share this with our schools at site visits. We share it with our governing boards when we meet with them annually. And while it's not directly reflected in the school performance framework, it is a helpful tool in reviewing performance. So we'll look at this for the commission. Here we have ELA. For students with 3 consecutive years enrolled at a commission school, we saw an increase in the success rate, and we saw that increase across all subgroups. So when you're looking at this graph, the same students are represented in each set of blue and orange bars. These are students that were enrolled in 2023 and in 2025. And you can see the growth across each group. I'll also note that this analysis also looks at those 4 performance levels, so not just proficiency, in wanting to see, are we moving students closer to proficiency if they're not there yet? And for the commission as a district, we did see an 11-point gain there too. We saw similar trends for math. Again, we see the success rate for students who are remaining enrolled in commission schools increase for math overall and across subgroups. And again, when we're looking at that performance level, looking at our students who are moving closer to proficiency, there we saw a 15-point gain. So all of this information is included within our annual report, which is found on our website. We will update the annual report once audits are received. Looking forward, staff is going to continue to lean in and support our schools, and we have systems in place to discuss these outcomes with schools and with governing boards. I'll remind you too that in your binders you'll also see the appendices for this presentation about comparative performance, and as always, please reach out if you have any questions or would like additional information. Thank you for your time today.
So, just because Mary's not with us anymore, I really want to hone in and look at that, both the ELA and the math. I mean, that is remarkable growth on the students with disabilities. I just don't want that to go unrecognized of what that actually means. So, again, I think our schools deserve a lot of praise, because that is, you don't see that kind of bar jump in those students with disabilities like that. So just something that I think we ought to take a moment and just recognize of what's really happening for those students in our schools that do have those disabilities. So again, just wanted to highlight that because that was something that just jumped out to me when I looked at this.
Any other questions or comments?
Could I ask one, Chair
Sure.
Richardson? These are really impressive numbers, the staying in model. What is our commission-wide retention rate of students? Do we know, and how does that compare to the state in terms of how many kids are on the whole, leaving our school? Do we know that as a whole?
I can get that for you.
Okay. I'm just curious if you know, is it higher or lower than the state? If you have any, I know charters often have fluctuation, but I guess I'm just curious. This is some compelling data. If you can convince people to stay in a model, I'm just
Right.
curious what that looks like.
So I know that it was an increase of about 300 students into proficiency. So I'm trying to do that backwards math right now. All of that to say, I can get you the end counts for each of the bars to know how many students are held within each of those for the success rates.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Rebecca. That's a great report, and I'm sure you're going to get some follow-up questions. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a presentation on Commission School Intervention from Maggie Lund and Claire Seguin. Maggie, you are recognized.
Sorry, we are actually shuffling so that I can have the clicker. My name is Claire Seguin. I'm the Federal Programs Coordinator here at the Commission, and I'm joined today for this presentation by Dr. Maggie Lund. We are going to provide an update to the Commission on the school intervention policy, the state priority designation, and our next steps. And we also want to begin by acknowledging there are two overlapping and very similarly named things we're going to discuss today. So just kind of to frame yourself, when I'm speaking, I'm thinking about and speaking about the new requirements implemented by the Tennessee Department of Education and how that impacts us at the Commission and our schools, while Dr. Lund will be specifically referring to the Commission intervention policy. We'll do our best to try to keep those separate as much as possible. The following Commission-authorized schools fell within the bottom 5% across the state in performance and are designated as priority schools based on the 2025 designations. Those schools are Lester Prep and Wooddale Middle School. Additionally, Nashville Collegiate Prep was named a targeted support and improvement school based on chronically low performance for their Black African American subgroup compared to overall performance. With the sunsetting of the Achievement School District, the General Assembly passed a new law in the spring of 2025 that outlines new requirements for how the state and LEA must handle schools designated as priority schools. Under that new law, there is a comprehensive tiered intervention system that drives how LEA and the department then work with those priority schools. As required under Public Chapter number 464, beginning with the list of priority schools generated this year, the Commission shall develop a comprehensive and progressive support and intervention plan for each of our identified priority schools. Through this, the Commissioner of Education assigns a tier to each of the schools based on the priority school designation. The assigned tier dictates the intervention and the corrective action options available to the LEA. Of the 3 tiers available, the Commissioner of Education assigned Lester Prep to a Tier 1 and Wooddale Middle School to a Tier 2. Within the new targeted intervention system framework developed by the department, Nashville Collegiate Prep is considered a pre-tier school and is not subject to the comprehensive intervention plan. However, as Dr. Lund mentioned earlier, they are in their interim review year and will work closely with the Commission, receiving quarterly on-site monitoring to monitor their progress toward the removal of their TSI designation. So in Tier 1, which the Commissioner of Education designated Lester Prep, there are the following options available for the LEA to choose between: implementing a department-approved school turnaround intervention, partnering with a department-approved independent school turnaround expert, or implementing one of the intervention options from a more progressive tier, Tier 2 or Tier 3. Of these options, we have selected option A and will work with Lester Prep and the department to implement an evidence-based school turnaround intervention. We are currently working through the requirements outlined by the department and aligning those with the authorizing team's plan of correction to reduce administrative burden and support school autonomy as much as possible. The Commissioner of Education has designated Wooddale Middle School as a Tier 2 priority school and provides LEAs with the following intervention options: implementing a department-approved intervention with an independent school turnaround expert, replacing some or all of the school's leadership or staff, transferring operation of the charter, converting to a public charter school, or implementing one of the intervention options from Tier 3. Given Wooddale's status as a public charter school and our limitations as authorizer, the Commission has selected option A as the intervention option for Wooddale Middle School and is currently interviewing department-approved turnaround experts.
Can I stop you just for a second?
Of course.
In looking at this, as I understand it, although their actions did not constitute replacing some or all of the school's leadership and specific instructional staff as an intervention, I understood that they had in fact done that last year, so I just want the Commission to know that in addition to the formal process that's being implemented, a lot of the staff has changed there.
Yes, they actually made specific changes in light of this designation, or anticipation of this designation, rather. However, because the designation wasn't provided prior to that staffing change, we were not allowed to consider that as an as an intervention option.
Can you help me just understand when or how we decide whether it's appropriate to do the turnaround with an independent expert versus LEA-led? At least I'm understanding in the case of the first one, it's LEA-led, and the second, there's a independent expert. How do we choose the remedy? And then how are the independent turnaround experts chosen?
Yeah, great questions. We actually don't have the opportunity for Wooddale Middle School as a Tier 2 school to consider an LEA-led intervention. So within the tiered intervention system framework that the department has created this year, Tier 1 schools do have the opportunity to engage in an LEA-led intervention. We could also have chosen a more intensive intervention, including partnering with a turnaround expert for Lester Prep as a Tier 1 school. However, we chose, given Lester Prep's designation as Tier 1, to stick within kind of the bucket and the parameters that were outlined for Tier 1, including going with an LEA-led intervention. Wooddale, as a Tier 2 school, does not have the option to participate in an LEA-led intervention. Their kind of baseline requirement for an intervention program must be in conjunction with a turnaround expert. In terms of how that's chosen, the department has actually selected 5 different independent turnaround experts and provided those to all districts to choose from if they pursue option A. We engaged in a conversation with many of them, selected 2 that were kind of our front runners. We've interviewed with them at the district level. We've also presented Wooddale with the opportunity to engage in conversation with both of those turnaround experts as well and gathered their feedback. Ultimately, it is the decision of the LEA which turnaround expert we go with, but we did want to solicit their opinion as much as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You said we couldn't use B. Why? I mean, if the school saw this coming and the school went ahead and did option B, why could we not also say they saw this coming, it's one of our schools, they're in doing this, but then maybe we said, hey, they didn't do enough in some of the specific teacher positions, instructional staff, and we're making these additional things. Why was that not an option to us? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. The staffing changes that Wooddale had made preceded their designation. And so the department did not allow the changes they had made already to count toward a new intervention being put in place.
All right, I feel like that just,
Don't feel that way when I asked this question before the meeting, because that's why I know about the people not being there. I couldn't make any sense of it either.
But
It's just, it's
that's
kind of the-
bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy.
It's because that's the way they said it's going to be.
Okay. Just something that we might want to talk to some of our friends on the Hill that might need to be looked at as we go forward. Because, again, I feel like this is one where if the school saw it coming, they saw a problem, they started down this road, even though it still ended up on that because it's still based on that, they were preemptive in making those changes. And it almost feels like, well, we don't get to credit you for actually being proactive in making those changes. It feels a little stupid. I'm just going to say stupid.
No, it is not logical, but the.
She said it more political.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, by the time you're into this process, you're already into the next school year. So if you are at that point in time taking action with respect to teachers who should not be asked back at the end of the prior year, the whole thing is completely backwards. So you are correct in your analysis. I couldn't make it work either.
We did inquire about that option to make sure that we were considering all the things.
Could I ask one?
LEA-led, you're not talking about a direct run.
So we will not be facilitating it. We will be engaging with Lester Prep in terms of figuring out what that is. We are going to align very closely with what their plan of correction is through the commission policy and do our best to make those align.
Could I ask one question? maybe not politically correct either, but what exactly is a turnaround expert, and how confident do we feel in these candidates? I mean, did they have a pretty good track record, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to speak to their vetting through the department, as we were provided a list of those who had already been vetted. They range. There are some that are local and really have built their kind of base in Tennessee. There are some that are national partnerships and programs, and the two that we have more deeply explored offer very different proposals in what they could do for Wooddale Middle School. So it really seems to be quite a range of what that partnership can look like. We are currently working through how to align the commission intervention policy with the requirements outlined by the department to try to streamline and make sure that what Wooddale is having to do for the duration of their partnership with the turnaround expert is not in addition to other things that we would be asking them to do for the commission. But to answer your question of the actual experts themselves, we were provided a list.
That means it's exclusive to that list, or we could supplement the list? And, I mean, there must be other experts out there, right?
My understanding from the information we've been provided is that this is the list that we can choose from.
So when you get the list, they pick it. How do we interact with the person picked from this list? Are we still, I'm assuming, very much involved in this, or do we sort of step back and whoever this person is that they're bringing in sort of is running what's happening?
Yeah, so we were provided this list by the Division of School Turnaround with the department. And then, like I said, we kind of did our own interview process with several of the different vendors, provided Wooddale the opportunity to meet with our top two choices, and then are continuing to meet and discuss within the district to make that final decision. Our vision, once we move forward with this, is to create a procedure that kind of outlines what that ongoing communication and partnership will look like. Transparently, there are a lot of pieces from the department that they are sharing as it becomes available. So our goal is to kind of take the information that's being provided, synthesize that, and try to, like I said, make alignment with the intervention policy as it exists on the commission level, and then work alongside our schools to kind of navigate that process together. There are requirements coming up on a future slide about ongoing monitoring that is required for these schools. And that will include both the turnaround expert and representatives of the commission while we kind of go through this process for the next 2 years or so.
Yep, more.
I want to follow up on Tom's question on this list. Has anybody looked at the people who are on this list to see if any of the people on this list have worked with any of the schools previously in the ASD that did not turn around to remove them from consideration for our schools?
Have they looked at that from the department lens? I do not know. From our lens, we are aware that there is some overlap, either that have worked with the ASD or have worked with some of our schools in particular, and are taking that into consideration.
My final note here is that the statute was written with a lot of expectations for the LEA, which puts us in a very interesting place as a charter school authorizer. And so when Claire kind of walks through requirements, there are things that the department has said the LEA must do because of the way statute is written and contemplated. So we're in ongoing conversations with the department around, okay, what exactly does this mean? Is this a commission level decision? Is this a school level decision? So we're really pushing to figure out where is our line, but I do think just for visibility is that the statute just requires a lot more of districts in this area, and therefore it will require a lot more of us in this area.
And Tess, and again, I'm glad you said that, because looking at this list, I figured that was the case, that it was written for LEAs, because point D doesn't make any sense considering all of our schools are already charter schools, public charter schools. So I'm wondering if this is something that we maybe should Hayden seems bored up on Capitol Hill these days. If we should somehow figure out, all right, we're not an LEA in the sense of most district LEAs. It is a little bit different, so there's got to be somewhat of a different framework for us within these tiered interventions to be able to hold. I mean, honestly, what I'd love to say is, again, I'm talking out loud without thinking through all the ramifications. School doesn't take our interventions, then we're able to pre-sunset their contract early. I mean, I'm thinking through, we've got different things that we could do that an LEA couldn't. So that's why I think we've just got to have some nuances in this that don't exist right now. So Hayden, you're welcome for, all the arrows they shoot at your way.
Okay, I would just add two things. There is a process that we will explain as to how this is not a long-term process, because if they meet this designation 2 years in a row, we have to revoke their charter. And there's no appeal. The other thing I would just ask the commissioners to keep in mind as we go through this is this is a lot of work on the part of the staff with these schools. And as our portfolio of schools grow, if we have more and more schools that find themselves in this designation, this is going to require more and more time and staff. Most of us realize that Wooddale is a relatively recent acquisition to our portfolio and did not come with the most stellar performance background. But I just think it's something we've got to keep in mind, because this is a tremendous amount of work. And as we'll walk through the rest of this, this is going to be a ton of work, especially if you have a number of schools that fall into this category all at once. So with that, we will return to our presentation.
Thank you. So for Wooddale and our selected intervention of partnering with an independent school turnaround expert, there are some requirements that are outlined. They must include an intervention committee for the priority school that is made up of school board members, school employees, and parents of students attending the school. It must include a contract with an independent school turnaround expert approved by the department, and it must include a written intervention plan developed by the independent school turnaround expert. After consulting with the department as it relates to the commission, the department considers a school board member to be a commissioner. We are grateful for Commissioner Richards agreeing to step in this role.
I got voted most likely in figuring out how to fly the plane while we're still building it.
We also have presented Wooddale Middle School with the opportunity to add a member of their own governing board to the intervention committee if desired, and they have identified several key stakeholders and are working to solidify the remaining committee members. So as mentioned, there are some new requirements that the LEA must do. Within this framework, the oversight and the monitoring related to the selected intervention are pretty consistent across Tier 1 and Tier 2, but the frequency of them does vary. There must be LEA-led on-site learning walks to monitor the implementation and effectiveness of the selected intervention. So for Lester Prep, as a Tier 1 school, we'll be monitoring the effectiveness of the LEA-led intervention that we create alongside them. For Wooddale, partnering with the turnaround expert, we'll be monitoring the effectiveness of the intervention established with the turnaround expert. We are also hoping to lean heavily into the supports and structures, the systems already in place at each school. Again, trying to inform those visits. We will have district representation, and at various points, we'll also have department attendance at those visits. Both schools will be subject to department-led biannual on-site visits in which at least one commission staff member will attend. Priority schools have previously been required to have an on-site annual visit with the department. We've previously been able to kind of lump that in with the authorizing site visit, and that is no longer allowable moving forward. So these will be in addition to the annual authorizing site visit. Both schools will also complete department-required data submission throughout the year, and commission staff will meet monthly with the department to review those submissions as well as the findings from walkthroughs. Not reflected on your slide, but Nashville Collegiate Prep as a pre-tier school will be following kind of the quarterly Tier 1 monitoring requirements. And then just to take a step back and look at the timeline of how we got here, The State Board of Education approved priority schools and federal designations in late November. The commission was notified with the official tiered placement in early December, and we provided schools with this information the same week that it was made available to us. We had to submit an implementation procedure timeline to the department for approval earlier this month, and the allocation methodology for 2 grants geared towards school improvement and turnaround efforts was approved earlier this week. Schools will be completing budgets for these grant funds in the coming weeks. By February 13th, we must have solidified our intervention selection for both Wooddale Middle School and Lester Prep, and we will begin supporting schools with their internal needs self-assessment, the building of intervention committees, and the notification of their stakeholders. Both schools have made significant progress toward these deliverables already. As the spring continues, we will work to align the department-issued timelines and deliverables with the commission intervention policy requirements, which Dr. Lund will speak about now.
Tess, I'm going to go back to frustration I had when I served up on the Hill, and I'm seeing it here. Schools aren't getting notified till halfway through the school year. Half the school year's over. How do we get this, how can we work with the department to get this sped up so that this list is coming out sooner, so that we're not losing half a school year of potential interventions?
Completely agree. I will communicate that to the Department of Education. It's really regarding availability of data, quickness of data. I will preview that the state of Tennessee is, with 26-27, is moving much of their all TCAP assessments online, with the exception of writing, with the goal of just having data back quicker. Now, I don't know if that will allow us to have designations quicker, but there is a general understanding that schools and parents need this data much more quickly.
Okay, because, I mean, they took the test in April. It's now December. I mean, that's another 8 months that went by. If we waited for schools, we would be dropping the hammer on the schools. I think that this has got to be something that's fixed. We can't do it, but I'm just troubled with holding people accountable to a standard that we're not giving them time to fix. It's frustrating.
Just to be clear, this is on a 3-year cycle. It's still awful, don't get me wrong, I completely agree, but it's not that they're going to have to change for measurement by this April.
And I
It's
get,
still
and I know all
unacceptable.
of that, but it still goes to the delay of getting accurate information to speed up help for kids. It's lagging. We saw this going back to, it was when we first moved to online testing. This whole thing has never recovered since the catastrophe back in, what was that, 2015, 16? We're 10 years in. Like, somebody's got to figure this out. I mean, we can now DoorDash food in less time than we can get data back for schools. So something's not working.
We hear you and agree. Okay. Would you like to proceed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I think a couple things that we're talking about, I think it's important to make some clarifications around, Claire spoke to this in the beginning of the presentation, of the levels of intervention and tiers that the Tennessee Department of Education has put out as part of statute in their progressive tiered intervention policy that we as the LEA of the schools have to abide by. We also have our own intervention policy as the authorizer for charter schools, is policy 3.400. You all are somewhat familiar with this policy. We have schools that are and have been under intervention before. We've carried out this process with fidelity in years past. Through this, we have done some updates to our policy, which Ashley Thomas will be talking about in Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee, just to ensure that there is alignment with the requirements in statute. We did a crosswalk of what is required in the TDOE's intervention policy and what's required in ours. We will continue to do our best to eliminate administrative burden where at all possible for our schools. So we will align the interventions that we've chosen as part of policy 3.400 and make those talk to each other as much as possible. just to make sure that our schools are not receiving any additional requirements from the intervention that we are putting them under as part of our policy, if that makes sense. However, I do want to note that as Commissioner Richards was speaking to, the priority designations come out every 3 years. And there is statute that's listed here on the slide, 4913-122, which is a charter school on the priority list for 2 consecutive cycles, has the requirement to be revoked. It is a shall be revoked. So I do want to note that being on the priority list is a severe sign of academic underperformance. And so we have chosen to recommend both Lester Prep and Wooddale Middle School to be placed on probationary status in alignment with our intervention policy as a level 3, just to communicate the severity that academic performance must be improved to ensure that the school is not identified in the next cycle, because if they are, that triggers this statute in which they shall be revoked. So there's some next steps here. Schools who receive placement on level 3 intervention in alignment with our policy will receive an official notice after your vote, if you so choose to place them on this intervention tomorrow at the full commission meeting. We will begin working with the school to develop a plan of correction and cadence of meetings as we have, much like we've done with Bluff City High School, who previously was on a level 3 intervention probationary status and moved off of that. So you all are somewhat familiar with the process in which we hold bi-monthly meetings, and we have a plan of correction developed where we work really closely with the school. So in this vein, I will be working very closely with Claire, and we will be making sure that the requirements that the school is held to as part of the TDOE's progressive tiered intervention policy, I will use those as the foundation of the plan of correction that we'll be using to monitor the school. And then updates on the school's progress with the plan of correction will be provided to you all in the July 2026 meeting. If there's nothing, any other questions on the priority school progressive tiered intervention policy or our intervention policy before I move forward with some other intervention updates?
Commissioner Parr?
So there are 2 things that come to mind. So thanks, Maggie, for what you've shared. Thanks, Rebecca. Our chair talked about the fact that this is tough work, and there's a lot of man hours that's gone into it. In fact, I think working with, they're not problem children, but they are, in fact, people that we need to do a lot of hand-holding with. And so when I think about what we do in a corporate setting, when we have to move forward to put people who are non-performers on some type of corrective action plan, we put them on a PIP, Performing Action Plan. Normally, those don't last, typically more than 30 days, 60 days. And there's really, again, a degree of monitoring that takes place really on a day-to-day basis, in some instances on a week basis. So you really do know exactly in terms of, again, from a measurement standpoint, these are objectives that we, in fact, said that you need to achieve, okay? So that we can really know that there's an issue in terms of improvement. We don't wait a quarter. We don't wait a month. So that's one thing that comes to mind in terms of this issue of, again, immediate feedback. We kind of know the problems. That's not, that's nothing earth-shattering. It's just what do we do? And we talked some time ago about this issue that we have people that, fortunately, weren't maybe involved initially when goals were established or missions were established. They don't even know sometimes maybe where the bathrooms are. And we talked about this issue of, again, going beyond just, in fact, again, data crunching, okay, assessing in terms of whether or not you're meeting standards or not meeting standards. And that's really, in some ways, putting our arms around us and providing advice and counsel and doing some hand-holding. And so this is a question, Maggie, because I don't know, is to that degree, because we talked about that as a body, are we being supportive in a way which says, particularly to those folks that are neophytes, maybe in these school systems, they just don't have the background. They don't know where first base is. Here's what we're suggesting that you look at doing, because we have the experience base and we, in fact, can tell you how to, in fact, hit these milestones. And they all come to you many times where, again, maybe there's an embarrassment, maybe there is an issue where, again, there's arrogance, but they don't know the right questions to ask. So again, my 2 points was the issue in terms of that time element. A month is too long. A quarter is too long. There needs to be immediate feedback. And in a lot of instances, at the end of the day, you know within a week whether that person is going to make it. Because, again, the time is money. And when we were talking about dealing with a performance issue, get them out. That's the best thing that you can do, truly, if they're not performing. But then answer my question about to what degree, based on our conversation from months ago, we're doing a little bit more than just analyzing data and reporting back. But we really are maybe saying, Billy Bob, Hazel, Shanae, whatever your name is, here's the deal. You're failing. I'm here to help you. And so this particular the intervention person, to me, that's a person who, in fact, can play a really big role. Okay? It's just, we know the problem. How do we create a win-win? Okay? How can we really look at having some degree of success? Okay? Forget about the data. Well, you can't. Sorry. You can't forget about the data. But, let's talk about setting them up for success. Question.
I think one of the things we continue to say to our schools, and we've communicated, even at lunch today we were saying this, is that your success is our success. A part of being an authorizer is providing assistance in upholding school autonomy and providing the best resources that we can provide our schools, knowing that they have the autonomy to utilize them. I think one of the things that Tess spoke about with this new intervention policy specifically for priority schools is that it is much more prescriptive. And so we will be much more in the weeds with our schools in terms of data and corrective action planning than maybe we have been in the past due to this new statute. However, I do want to name, we're talking about publicly available data at this point in time and priority designations and things, but we know this information sooner than what we're able to talk about in a space like this. And I think, I hope that we communicate, particularly through a lot of the oversight and monitoring efforts that we do with schools, site visits when we're on each of our schools' campuses once a year. We close out with every single school that we have in our portfolio in July to end that school year and have these really candid conversations that you're referencing of, hey, this is trending to not meet the mark. Let's talk about it. And I think, one of the things we pride ourselves on is ensuring that we are able to have those transparent conversations with our schools, and that is just part of what we do as an authorizing staff. Their success is our success, and we continue to wrap our arms around them with resources and anything that we can provide. And that is part of placing them on intervention as well, is we do engage with them much more frequently at a much deeper way with being in their building and with their leadership team and with their data.
That's music to my ears.
And I just want to add on, I won't call out the school, but one of the schools that we've been concerned about their data, we offered to them to have a 90-minute sit down where we showed them how to access things that they could access. It's about like giving them the tools to find the information themselves around how do you look into teacher level data? Like what are the trends that we're seeing that they need to then also see for themselves and start making some action. And so those are some of the areas where when we think about like implementing our mission about being a supportive partner, it's not just saying, here's all the data, then for yourself. It's, look, we're here to sit down. We can talk to you about, here are the reports you can pull. Here's how you pull them. Here's what we're seeing. Now it's up to you to do something with it, but we can't just expect everyone to know all the things. Without giving them some tools in their toolbox to then implement.
I'll add one thing to that too, quickly before moving on, is as you saw with what Rebecca presented in the annual report, we have a lot of schools who are doing things very well. And one of the things that we've continued to do across teams is connect them. Of saying, hey, look, you're struggling with chronic absenteeism. Here's a school in your area that's doing this really well. Why don't you talk, right? And so we're doing a lot more of that too as our portfolio grows, and we're seeing really bright spots, trying to leverage those individuals in schools that are doing this really well and providing those insights even at a school level.
Can I ask one question on that? Just looking at our portfolio, like, we have such a range. I mean, KIPP's knocking it out of the park, you know, with most of their schools. Like, I know that we're spending more time with lower performers, which is great. Are we able to systemically give more autonomy to our higher performers, or take anything off their plates so that they do have more time for, you know, sharing what's going well? I just don't know if we have the ability to, I know we're legally required, you know, they have to do a lot of things, but are there some ways we can, like, not do as many required site visits, or does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. I mean, I think as much as we can, we try to limit our presence in buildings if we know that you're doing a great job. We're going to do a half-day site visit because you're knocking it out of the park, and that's all we're going to do. Now, we still have to have special education conversation, like all of those things, but yes, I think from the lens of the schools that do really well, we try our best to, like, either consolidate things on a network level, consolidate their site visits, make it as easy as possible for them so that we're getting what we need and then we can get out. And also be able to spend our time with the schools that more deeply need us.
Do you want to go on?
Sure. So speaking about some other intervention actions that we are taking as a result of school year 24-25 data being issued, there are 2 notices of concern for academic underperformance that we're issuing. Rebecca referenced this in the annual report presentation. Tennessee Nature Academy and Rocketship Nashville Northeast are receiving notices of concern for academic underperformance. This has to do with letter grades and TBOS. They have already received these. They received it back in December when we issued the annual report. They are aware that this is something that they're being placed on, and we'll continue conversations with them throughout this school year to ensure that performance is improved. And then I also just want to remind us that Bluff City High School is remaining on a level 2 plan of correction for academic underperformance. This is a continuation from the previous school year. They are entering currently in their renewal cycle. So as a result of the compilation of the renewal process, we will come to you all once that is complete with a recommendation there. But at this point in time, they are remaining on a level 2 intervention. The other thing that we've discussed at this point is the Nashville Collegiate Prep interim review. The interim review is taking place in year 5 of the charter agreement, so they are currently in this process. They submitted an interim report to us, which is a series of questions that was submitted. It's a look back at their performance over the last 4 and 5 years. Their interim site visit was next week. It is now pushed a week due to weather. This visit, given the high-stakes nature, is a full-day site visit. So as Tess mentioned, most of our site visits are half-days. This is a full day given that it's an interim visit. We have a longer data meeting in the beginning of the visit where we sit down with the school and network leadership and talk about the data trends over the last 5 years in addition to what we're seeing at the site visit. Then we also hold classroom observations and meet with stakeholders, including the governing board chair, during that visit. We are also going to hold an additional meeting with leadership and network staff once the financial audit is available. They've stated to us that, many schools have issued delays in their audits, but ultimately we should be able to have that at the end of the first week of February. And that will involve questions of financial nature once we receive that audit. The outcomes of the interim review are provided to you all at the April 2026 commission meeting. As a reminder, the interim review is aligned to the renewal criteria, which is going to state whether or not the school is on or off track for renewal. And at that point in time, we will recommend any subsequent intervention as needed.
Okay, any other questions or comments? On behalf of the committee, I will just let the whole commission know we are going to recommend putting both Lester Prep and Wooddale Middle on probation status tomorrow for vote of the full commission. so that you've seen that on your agenda. Thank you so much. We appreciate your hard work in this area and understand the difficulties that we all face.
Chair Richards.
Yes, ma'am.
In advance of our next item, which will require a committee vote, since Commissioner Griscom had to step out pursuant to policy 1.100, you need to appoint another commissioner to come with you on the committee journey. So we'll need that vote before we move into the amendment petition.
Okay. Well, do we need to vote on it, or do I just get to?
You can just appoint.
Well, I think
your-
Commissioner Smith, Eddie Smith, ought to get to be on this committee with me. I like active participants, so we will continue on.
Bless you, Chris, you have no idea what you just did.
Well, that's fine. Okay, the next item on our agenda is an amendment petition from Lee Neely's Bend, presented by Beth Figueroa. Beth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Richards, and good afternoon, School Performance and Accountability Committee. My name is Beth Figueroa, and I am the Director of Authorizing here at the Charter Commission, and I'm here today to discuss the amendment petition that was filed by Lee Neely's Bend. First, as a general background, Lee Neely's Bend transitioned to the Commission following a successful exit of the Achievement School District due to its sustained academic performance and priority exit status. The Commission then granted a new 10-year charter agreement in January of 2025. Lee Neely's Bend currently serves approximately 220 students in grades 5 through 8 in the Madison neighborhood of Nashville. The amendment petition that was filed by the school would allow the school to phase out the 5th grade level, aligning with MMPS's reimagined grade reconfiguration, and also expand to a grades 6 through 12 model. This would be accomplished through the addition of one high school grade level per year, starting in 2026. So the fall of 2026 is when they would start that expansion, until reaching full enrollment of 525 students by the 2029-30 school year. Before discussing the merits of this amendment petition, I do want to name that there are limited options and choices that currently exist around Lee Neely's Bend. The proposed amendment does address the lack of high-quality secondary options that currently exist within the Hunters Lane cluster. Historically, Lee Neely's Bend students have transitioned to Hunters Lane High School, which reported a graduation rate of 79.5% in 2025 and a D letter grade. In contrast, other LEAD network schools that operate high schools consistently exceed a 90% graduation rate. And with this amendment, the expanded grade levels provide that necessary alternative for families in the Madison community. Next, I want to jump into the additional merits of the amendment application as outlined within the Executive Director's recommendation, starting with academics. And so to begin, the academic plan that was included within the amendment petition is supported by Lee Neely's Bend's demonstrated and consistent growth trajectory. The school has maintained a level 5 TVOS rating for 5 consecutive years, and notably, math success rates have increased from 11% to an estimated 25.4% in the most recent school year. The proposed expansion replicates the proven model of other LEAD high schools, such as LEAD Southeast and LEAD Academy. And to support in the transition, Lee Neely's Bend will utilize its SNAP protocol as an early warning system. Furthermore, the high school, the curriculum will feature the rigorous core academics and college preparatory seminars that they have at their other sites, ensuring that the middle school's current strong foundation is carried through with the students through graduation. Shifting to operations, the staffing plan provided with the amendment was highly detailed. LEAD will utilize a distributive leadership model, hiring tier-specific assistant principals of instruction, as well as assistant principals of students, and so growing their leadership year over year to support the additional students. The school will also continue to leverage their employee value proposition with a 1-to-6 instructional coaching ratio for their teachers, so supporting their teachers also during this growth phase. The facility plan is realistic, so the school currently has, they would stay within their current site, which is over 100,000 square feet, and it's on 30.8 acres, and so this provides ample space for the students even with the addition of a high school. The school has a thoughtful plan to designate a west wing specifically for the high school students, which would provide the physical and cultural separation from the middle school. And the site facility is secured through a lease with MMPS through June of 2035. And then shifting to fiscal viability, Lee Neely Spend has provided a multi-year budget that demonstrates positive net position through the full build-out. Startup costs are offset by philanthropic commitments and the reallocation of resources through that phase out of their 5th grade. And lastly, the Lee Network is fully committed to support by considering offsetting some of their lease costs to support in this growth. And the school has identified a break-even threshold of 250 students. So they've been able to prove that they can remain fiscally solvent, even if they don't fully meet that 525 enrollment projection. And then lastly, we know that community support is important when we look at schools that are looking to expand. And so within the amendment, there was clear evidence of community demand. The neighborhoods have seen significant growth in that area, and so looking at some neighboring elementary schools, there's currently been growth ranging between 35 and 61%. And so they believe that the combination of the expressed interest of the current 8th grade families paired with the growing neighborhood, that they would be able to meet their demands. And so based on the totality of the record and the amendment application, including their 5 years of a level 5 growth, the fact that they have their 10-year facility lease and the proven high school model that the network has, it is the recommendation that the School Performance and Accountability Committee move this forward to the full commission for consideration and vote, and that would allow the school to expand to serve grades 6 through 12, as well as increase their enrollment to a maximum of 525 students. And I can take any questions.
Questions?
So just to make sure I just got put on this committee about 30 seconds ago. So, all right, so based on past performance, you're recommending it. Based on a strong financial plan, the space that they've got, that's really the crux of the recommendation. So with that, I would make the motion that we move this on to the full commission from the Performance Accountability.
Okay, before we do that, I just want to ask Executive Director Tess Stovall, you wrote a recommendation on this. It's included in the full commission materials. Do you have any comments on any of this?
I do not. I just want to say we appreciate the operator's thoughtfulness on this proposal. We believe it's very reasonable given where they are and also the geographic region of Nashville, the limited high school options. We think that this is a proven high school provider that has success in charter schools in Nashville, and we are excited to help them continue this opportunity in the Neely Spend area.
Okay. I noticed that they have wonderful TVOS performance. Their math scores have been improving. What about the ELA scores? Because that was the one thing on this that caused me a concern, because as I recall, they were not improving. They were going the other way.
Yeah, and Beth, if you want to, I mean, that's something that we have continued to push with them on, is around the ELA data. I think they're in an interesting spot because we have their governing board meeting in 2 weeks. So I was literally just looking at their data where they were actually on, they didn't meet standard on student retention as well. And so I was looking at, okay, kind of where are they at in terms of this transition from being a traditionally zoned school under the ASD to now being a fully optional school under the commission, and how is that shifting in terms of both their instructional approach, their recruitment approach for their enrollment. I think that the network deeply understands that ELA has to be a priority, especially given their success that they have seen in math, and also just given the population of students that they see, a high EL population as well, to really push in and support their teachers in the English learner space. Anything else, Beth, that you would want to add on the ELA front?
Not at this time, but I will happy to look into that and provide more detail based on the application.
Well, I just wanted to discuss, because we're going to, I'm going to second your motion to recommend to the full commission tomorrow that we approve this application for an amendment. but I want everybody to be aware that there are some things about this that we've got to work on. Okay, with that motion made, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we're done with this one. Next.
Maybe just a quick question. In
Yes.
situations where there is a shortcoming, let's say in ELA, have we considered having the head of school actually present for a conversation like this so that we could actually query that directly and understand what their plan is? I mean, maybe you've already spoken to them about it, but I'm just curious whether that's been done from a procedural standpoint, just to have more confidence. I mean, it seems like it's not a problem, but it might be useful in the future to think about that.
No, I appreciate that feedback. We have, in limited cases, brought the school leader in for questions specifically for the commission. That's something that Chair Richards and I can talk about on a go-forward basis on when are the right opportunities, when's the right time versus it better to be staff-driven. But the answer is yes. There have been a couple of occasions where we've had the school leader come directly and answer questions from the commission.
And I don't know whether it's done or procedurally okay, but I mean, that could be by Zoom as well if someone couldn't, come in person on the time, on the date.
Yeah, I
the same
think from our conversations with their meeting with their governing board next, 2 weeks from now, we have found it to be very effective when we meet with the governing board in this kind of situation to point out this kind of deficiency, because they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for the school performance. And I always like to at least give them a chance to exert their influence before we step in. So with this one being 2 weeks out, we talked about it, and it will be a topic of conversation. And then we can still have them come in. Not a problem.
So, and sorry, foggy brain, I'm trying to remember when all of this happened. Remind me, the school, when they transitioned from the ASD to us, they were vastly still outperforming their peers in ELA. So even though they're not where we want them to be, they were still outperforming their peers in that community. But again, to Tessa's point, they were a zone school. Now they're a kind of wide open option school, high ELL population. So I'm trying to rationalize all of those together, because I think we're trying to look at an apple cart and we're seeing oranges right now, because the data is going to tell one thing based on how they were, not what they're moving to. So I think that's where I'm struggling to understand.
Sure. I mean, I think when we look at all of our previous ASD schools, we acknowledge that they're all in this a little bit of a different ecosystem, because they were a traditional zone school, then moved into an open enrollment school. And so a part of the year or 2 or 3 transition under the commission is kind of right sizing is the wrong word, but determining what is their recruitment catchment area. How are they marketing themselves to students who are not automatically zoned to their school anymore? So that's been a part of the Lead Neely's Bend conversation, is around their enrollment strategies. Secondly, when we look at their ELA, although overall their proficiency rates are not where we want them to be, we feel comfortable with where they're going because of their performance levels compared to the neighboring options that are also available. And then when we look at the high school option of Hunter's Lane and it being a letter grade D, we see that even though there's still work to do within Lead Neely's Bend, that the students would be given a higher performing option to remain in the Lead Neely's Bend system should they choose to. And there are certainly students who will choose to go to a much more comprehensive, larger high school, larger offerings, et cetera. But I think in my conversations with the network, they recognize that there are students who want a smaller environment that is much more academically focused than a larger comprehensive high school. And so that's what overall gives me comfort in kind of making this recommendation and knowing that everyone still has work to do. And Bethany.
Thank you. We did pull this. Well, we pulled this data as we went through our recommendation itself. But when we did look at ELA, so as far as in comparison to math, ELA is definitely lower than the math. It is relatively stagnant. However, when we look at the ELA success rates of the neighboring schools, so it doesn't meet standard honor performance framework because they're in comparison to the entire MMPS district. But when we look at their ELA, yes, it is a concern, and we need to see it move out of that stagnant trajectory. It is still outperforming many of the schools in that cluster and area.
You're done for the moment? Okay. Well, the only other thing I would point out is that this does not set any precedent as far as a situation where we would choose to renew a school that's coming out of a non-charter, I mean, it's coming to us as a renewed charter, and then subsequently files a request to expand. I mean, my sense of this evaluation was the taking a grade away is much less problematic than the adding of a high school as far as what are their capabilities and how are they going to perform. So it looked to me, and these materials are in our materials if you want to spend some time with them, it looked to me like the analysis that was done on the expansion was as thorough and complete as it would have been had they originally been, seeking a new start to be a high school. I mean, it looked like it was all the same criteria. So that's how I got comfortable with it. But y'all take a look at it. We will bring this up tomorrow for the full commission for consideration, and we'll go with that. Do I need to formally do that, I guess? I'll take a motion. We voted. All right. Okay. Just wanted to be sure. The next item on our agenda is a presentation on the Opportunity Public Charter School Performance Framework by Maggie Lund. You're recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner Richards. We are going to pivot a bit and talk about a framework that is before you on final read for Opportunity Public Charter Schools. In order to dive into our discussion today of the changes that we recommend between first and final read, I want to also ground us in the purposes and intent of Opportunity Public Charter Schools. So statute established Opportunity Public Charter Schools to serve a population of 75% at-risk students, and they may serve grades 6 through 12. And additionally, statute outlines that the authorizer will develop a framework that has multiple measures and must include performance metrics and targets that ensure students are prepared for post-high school success. So I want to call that out specifically because some of the changes that we've made between first and final read are due to this component of the requirements in statute. I think it's also helpful for us to revisit what an at-risk student is before we dive into this discussion. So an at-risk student is a member of a family with a household income that does not exceed 400% of the federal poverty level and meets some of the criteria that's listed on this slide and the next slide. I want to call specific attention to students that qualify as at-risk, that are students who have been detained, dropped out of school, have been retained, or are chronically absent. This comes into play a lot with the recommendations that we made for changes between first and final read, particularly when it comes to post-secondary success and taking into account some of the situations in which at-risk students would be facing, particularly with credit attainment and graduation readiness.
Sorry, retained in that context means held back?
Held back, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We talk a lot about retention, and that means very different things. So thank you for clarifying that, yes. So the development process in creating the Opportunity Public Charter School Framework included quite a bit of engaging with other authorizers, national experts. I've met with the State Board of Education. They are responsible for the Model Performance Framework for Opportunity Public Charter Schools, which I've listed a comparison later in this presentation that I'll talk through. I've compiled resources of accountability frameworks from all over the nation in alternative charter schools in other states. Rebecca did an incredible amount of work pressure testing all of the data through this new framework with the thresholds that we have, and so that's actually one of the recommendations we have before you today is to adjust some of the thresholds based on some pressure testing that we were able to do. And then the last thing that I just want to call out is we've met with the Rock Academy twice in this process with the framework that we have before you today. They're happy to report that they are satisfied with where we are and called out specifically that they're very appreciative of our partnership. So wanted to name that as well because they are the Opportunity Public Charter School that would be held to this framework upon opening. So as I've mentioned, the changes that we have before you between first and final read, one is based on pressure testing. We want to adjust some of the some of the thresholds to the framework in the time and model analysis, and I'll talk about that in more detail shortly. And then we've also added a section to the academic portion of the framework called post-secondary readiness, and this is only for high schools, but it holds 10% of the weight and includes 3 new measures. One is a college and career readiness measure. This is something that Rebecca will talk about in more detail. We have a 1-year graduation rate and a credit attainment progress indicator, so we'll talk about those specifically.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. As Dr. Lund stated, following the pressure test, we found that the thresholds we originally had for time and model were not aligned to our intent for this measure. So time and model measures persistence and then the outcomes of those students that are remaining in the model. And so the desired outcome is an improved trajectory. So we have made that adjustment to be reflected in those indicators. So if a school is increasing the percentage of students who are proficient, they will meet standard. If they are moving students closer to proficiency, they will meet standard.
Thank you, Rebecca. I will now review the post-secondary readiness section of the academic portion of the framework. So as a reminder, this will hold 10% of the academic section weight. Middle schools will not have a post-secondary readiness measure in the framework at this time. So that weight would be reallocated to the time and model analysis portion of the framework. So particularly in thinking about the at-risk students that will likely attend an Opportunity Public Charter School, we wanted to answer some of the questions that are here on the screen. So this section really aims to address students on a standard graduation timeline. Are they ready for post-secondary life? For students who are not on a standard graduation timeline, which is 4 years and a summer in Tennessee, are they reaching graduation at some point in time? And then for all students, regardless of their timeline, are they making strides in moving towards graduation appropriately? So the additions that we've made are addressing those questions. We're going to start with the college and career readiness measure, which I'll turn back to Rebecca to talk through.
Thank you. So as Dr. Lund shared, we're thinking about measuring post-secondary readiness for each slice of the student body. And so this slice is for students who are on a standard timeline, meaning that they are going to graduate high school within 4 years and a summer. And CCR does that. So CCR is College and Career Readiness. This is a state accountability measure, so that also hits on alignment to state data sources. And to be counted as earning CCR status, a student first has to be a graduate, and then they have to have earned a certain CCR pathway. This can be earning a certain threshold on an ACT or an ASVAB, the Armed Forces test. It can be earning certain types of industry credentials by certain tiers. It can be earning college credits while they are in high school. So in thinking about that in context of an Opportunity Public Charter School and CCR, we want to see that these students that are on that standard timeline are earning CCR status at a comparable rate to the resident district. So for context here, Memphis-Shelby County Schools, their CCR rate is about 60%. Metro Nashville Public Schools is about 40%. And so our threshold would be that an Opportunity Public Charter School would be within 10 percentage points of the resident district in order to meet standard. It's a really interesting measure. It's got a lot of great data in the files. I'm really grateful to some of the folks at the department who have been good partners to us in helping us understand that as we're thinking about building out our internal data systems to best capture information about this as we move forward with our Opportunity Public Charter Schools. Now, for students who are not on that standard timeline slice, I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Lund to talk about the next slice.
Just a quick question. What kind of industry credentials qualify, and how are we thinking about that?
I'm so glad you asked. Here are some examples of industry credentials that would qualify a student for CCR status. If you earn a Tier 3 industry credential, this could be a private pilot license, a little unusual, but cool. A serve-safe food handler. So the tiered systems in CCR are directly related to the industry needs of the state. That's how they become a Tier 3 being the most recommended, down to Tier 1. So if you earn one of these for Tier 3, you automatically qualify. For a Tier 2, you can do a Tier 2 and a Tier 1. And so like Tier 1 is getting CPR certified, which a lot of our students at Bluff City get that certification, which is great.
I would just mention there's a whole series of IT certifications out there. I don't know whether that's something you've thought about, but.
Yes. I particularly liked that the Microsoft Office Specialist one because it included Excel.
Would you like to ask your question?
Sorry, can I ask, big picture question on the students who can attend? Is there anything that would disqualify a student? Like, is there an age limit for a student who could enroll in an opportunity charter or anything else like that? Because I saw all the things you have to check, but is there anything you're like, no, that wouldn't allow you to?
So you can't be an adult, and which is I think 21. Like in there, and also if you are over age, there are rules around whether or not you can enroll around special education, et cetera. All to say, this is not an adult charter school. And Hayden and I, tonight we can talk more in depth about adult charter schools because there are some states that have like very focused adult charter schools that are geared towards an overage student who did not graduate. This is a traditional high school age population.
And I would add, Opportunity Public Charter Schools at this point in time with the way that this framework will work is they're held to the same requirements as a typical charter school outside of the requirement for at-risk students. So they have the same school day requirements, calendar, et cetera.
Okay, would you like to proceed?
Okay, great. So one of the things that I want to note on college and career readiness is the denominator for this calculation is students graduating with 4 years in a summer. So in polling this, we've always had CCR as part of the recommendation for the Opportunity Public Charter School framework. Where we found some inhibitions is that denominator of 4 years in a summer when we think about some of the at-risk population that will be attending these Opportunity Public Charter Schools. So we have two additional measures that we've added to the post-secondary readiness section. The first is a one-year grad rate. So the one-year grad rate is for students who are not on a typical graduation timeline. We want to know if they're still reaching graduation despite not being on the 4 years in summer timeline. This measures the rate of eligible students who are actually graduating. So we're looking at this by year. So we'll pull how many students will be eligible to graduate in 1 year, and we'll look at the credits that they've attained, and then we'll look at how many students actually did graduate that year. So 70 to 84% of students graduating for this measurement would meet standard. Just as some context as to where these thresholds come from, it's similar to other frameworks in other states that we've utilized as part of this process, and we have pressure tested this with available data that we do have.
Quick question for you, and may not apply. School has a large students with disability. Disability can keep a student from obtaining some of these. Does that count against their percentage rate that could drop them below that 10% of a district if they have a very large student with disability population?
That's a good question. There are different diplomas in different situations for this. I think this is based on students who are on a traditional diploma pathway. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
You have a question? Sorry.
Oh, no,
okay.
proceed.
The next measure that we have added to the post-secondary readiness section is credit attainment progress. This answers the question for all students, regardless of timeline, are they moving towards graduation? And this looks at the credit earning rate or progress towards graduation. So this calculation will essentially be the number of credits that a student attempts versus how much they actually earn. So 75 to 90% of credits attempted are earned will meet the standard. Again, this is similar thresholds to other states, and we've pressure tested this. This really is a persistence measure. So we're looking to see is the school assisting students in actually earning the credits that they are attempting. Another really great plug for this measure as well is that we can pull it regardless of a graduating class. So our schools that are scaling year over year and opening, we actually can have this measure pulled regardless of them having a graduating class or not, where the other two, we have to have a graduating class to have that measure. These indicators I also want to name are similar to what is in the State Board's model framework, which I'll talk about that crosswalk now. Given the timeline of
Could
the...
I just, sorry, just a quick
Oh, sorry.
question. Does the school information system enable some of this data to be pulled easily, or
Yes.
do they need to reprogram it? I'm just trying to understand how ready some of the systems are to, for example, the 75 to 90% of credits attempted. Can that be exported pretty easily out of the system?
Yes, and I'll say too, Natasha Teal, who's a fantastic colleague of ours, has already forward thinking about how we can best support our schools to make sure that their school information systems are set up on the front end to sync properly with where we're going to pull this data.
Great, thank you.
I think that's a great question, and part of was the exercise of our pressure test was how available are the measures that we're looking to add here. And so we've had a lot of conversations with our data teams to make sure that we are able to pull these. So that's a great point. So given the timeline of the commission needing a framework by authorizing an opportunity public charter school and the release of the State Board model framework, we have received some questions around like what are the differences and why do they look slightly different? So I want to kind of give you this crosswalk here and name that the model and the measures that we have between both, we have a lot of the same ingredients. It looks a little different in terms of the way in which we weight it and where they fall within our framework. I also want to name that we're the first authorizer to approve and authorize an opportunity public charter school. And so the headline here is we will run this for a few years, and if we need to make adjustments, we will. That has been mentioned to the Rock Academy, who is the school that we have authorized. They are aware of it. And so as we run this, if we find that things are not working, we will adjust. And the State Board has said the same with their model. So here you see the model framework for the State Board on the left and the Commission's Opportunity Public Charter School framework on the right. And the breakdown of weights are there for you to look at as well. We capture a couple notes of differences. So the student engagement section within the State Board's model framework captures things like attendance and chronic absenteeism. We already measure that within the organizational performance section of our framework. That does not live in the academic section, so that's why that looks different there. We also, instead of having a student engagement section that talks about post-secondary measures, we have our own just post-secondary readiness section. But I do want to note that the post-secondary measures are very similar to what is in the State Board's model framework. It just looks a little different, but when you look at the academic sections between the two. I also want to name here that we have a time and model analysis, and that is our comparative performance. One thing that the State Board does not have in the model framework is comparative performance, given that opportunity public charter schools are new entities, and there's really no apples to apples comparison that we have at this time to compare them to. We feel very strongly that a comparison is important, so the time and model analysis allows the school to compare to itself over time as it grows. In the future, as we have more schools come online and we have better comparative data, this will likely change. But for the meantime, this is a really strong analysis that you've seen in much of the materials that you have in front of you of students who stay in the model. Are they improving? And that's the question that we aim to answer with that comparative performance piece. Any questions on this crosswalk?
So Maggie, what about best practice models throughout the country? Is that also going to be taken consideration in terms of, again, this issue of comparison analysis?
Can you say more about that question?
You talked about comparing the school itself in terms of seeing that there's some degree of maybe improvement. My question is if we talk about trying to, since we're new, this is new, there are not maybe a lot of states that are doing this, school districts that are doing this, but what's best practice? And particularly as we talk about from an analysis standpoint, to see if in fact, again, we have best practice systems that procedures that we're following. Is that going to be taken consideration?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think as the school comes online and begins to open, this is a situation in which we are already developing systems on our end to ensure that we're tracking and maintaining the data that we need to run the framework from a best practice standpoint. Some of the things that we're actually looking at, particularly for the at-risk population that is intended to serve by Opportunity Public Charter Schools, that requires tracking on the school's end of those students, our end as a district, and ensuring that they're meeting their requirements there. If you're looking at like academic best practices, I would say that, that's something that we will continue to work directly with the operator on. Not to completely call back to the previous conversation of their success is our success, but we have named that though this is a model that they're held to in their charter agreement and this is their framework, we are a partner in this work and we will continue to adjust as they learn and as we run this framework if there are adjustments that are needed.
And one other question, in terms of your research, how many opportunity schools throughout the country exist?
That's a great question. So Tennessee is unique in terms of the Opportunity Public Charter School model. It is not the same in other states. So most other states that we've met with have a lot of alternative schools that serve similar purposes. But as it stands with statute in Tennessee, Opportunity Public Charter Schools are not alternative schools. Now, I think that in practice, they're very similar. And so a lot of the frameworks and data analysis that we've done are for alternative schools in other states. And we met with some in Colorado and New York and other states too that have shared their frameworks with us and talked about how they monitor those schools. And we continue to be in conversations with them as well to ensure that we are upholding best practice.
This is a big deal, particularly for someone who, in fact, is a founder of a charter school for 10, 12 years. And I can't tell you how many of, again, our scholars we've lost, okay, who, in fact, again, had issues in terms of juvenile justice system. We had to kick them out. And they go to, again, these scenarios where, again, these alternative schools for kids of that nature. They slip through the cracks. They never get their diplomas. And in a lot of instances from data that we tracked, they wind up in trouble. So this is a big deal, right? I mean, for that segment of again, particularly our urban core, where these kids, again, really challenged, we can make a difference in the lives of these scholars. I think that's a big deal. It really is. So I look forward to hearing again how we're faring with the Rock. And when are they going to open?
It's a great question. We have a pre-opening update from Sophie coming shortly that will talk about that.
Okay, other question, do you have more to do, or?
Sorry, one more slide.
One more slide, okay. No, we're doing good, I just want to make
Tired
sure.
of hearing from
I
you.
would just
We have a question.
I would just make a brief comment. I think the push on best practices is excellent. I think it may be that what other states are doing is not really best practice. And so we should just make sure that, we're being critical. There are times when we want to follow what other states are doing, and other times we'll say, well, that's actually not suitable for us. So, that's something obviously is a more general statement, but I just want you to have the sense of freedom not to feel like you've got to copy what's happening in other states just to be in compliance with best practices. So, choosing wisely, I think, in that context is helpful. Anyway, just wanted to make that comment.
Well, they're pretty smart, Tom, so you don't have to worry about that.
Thank you. So the last slide that I have here, which I think is just helpful, is looking at the commission framework that our schools are held to, like side-by-side comparison with the Opportunity Public Charter School framework. I know there were some questions at our last conversation on first read about rigor, like, are we still holding our schools to a high bar? Is it an attainable bar? What does this look like? And so I think it's helpful for us to see this side by side. As you can see, the only real differences have to do with the post-secondary readiness measure on the Opportunity Public Charter School framework, comparative performance being slightly different, given that we don't have a true comparison for Opportunity Public Charter Schools, so there's the time and model analysis, and then the weights. And so, as I mentioned previously, Rebecca has done quite a bit of work pressure testing schools through this framework. One of the ways that we did that is we actually took schools who, on the surface from our general analysis, would likely meet the criteria of at-risk students and run them through both frameworks. And so I think, look, there's always concern about rigor in frameworks. We want to make sure that both of our frameworks are always fair and rigorous. We believe that the framework in front of you for Opportunity Public Charter Schools on Final Read achieves what we want it to achieve. It provides the context that's needed for the population intended to be served, and kind of acknowledges the lack of data that we have when it comes to comparative performance, but allows us to look at the school and how they're serving students that persist in that model, which is also a persistence measure in and of itself. I also want to note here that the mission-specific goal, which I know we've had questions about earlier and talked about, is weighted more heavily with an Opportunity Public Charter School. And I think that's important and intentional given the way in which they have aligned their model to serving at-risk youth. We want to make sure that we honor that, but we are going to work in lockstep with the operator to make sure that that goal is rigorous and fair as well. And overall, I think this framework really just holds a realistic, high bar, but it is attainable based on the data that we've run through that. So we feel good about what's in front of you today. And with that, I'm finished.
All right, other comments or questions? Okay, I just want to say, you know, the big difference with this and these alternative schools and other things that we've seen tried is that this format does require the adherence to a normal school schedule. And spending time with the ROC, one of the things that they believe is that these unengaged students or disengaged or minimally engaged students actually will benefit from having the incremental structure of having to, you know, chronically attend and be part of an organization. This is a very small school to start. It's under 100 kids. But absent this, these folks have no place to really go. So I'm optimistic. I think we've done the right thing in trying to effectuate what the legislature intended and what in my heart I know we need to try to reach some of these kids who have no hope. And we just have got to try to find another way. So we're going to be flying the plane on this one too while we're building it. But thank you so much for your thoughtful work. This is going to be reviewed with Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee after this committee sometime later tonight. And then it'll come out of that committee if it's approved, so we don't have to do anything. Yes.
We've been flying enough planes. Can we ask for an airport?
Yeah, well, yeah, let's get an airplane.
Maybe just a very brief question related. I think the post-secondary readiness is a really interesting measure. So my simple question would be, it seems like we're early in the development of what that looks like. How frequently do you think we'll update factors that go into it, things that we'll be measuring? It strikes me as a really important area, but also one subject to change over time.
I agree. I think this is yet to be seen. I think once we run it and have a few years under our belt in running the measure, we can make small tweaks and adjustments as needed once we have data available. But I think it's a good point, and that's really how we're approaching the Opportunity Public Charter School framework as a team in lockstep with the ROC Academy. Is as we start running these measures, if we notice that new things are coming online or new ways to be innovative, we'll make sure that that's adjusted accordingly.
And just to add on, the CCR measure is a measure developed and run by the Department of Education. So just in terms of like what qualifies as tiers or whatever, that's a Department of Education level decision. We're just then using that data in our framework.
Interesting.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting is that if you look at the letters of intent for new charter schools, there are a couple opportunity charter schools that are going to be, they've at least indicated an intent to try to get a charter in Shelby County. So we'll have some comparisons, hopefully, pretty soon. Not here with us. I'm hoping they'll be approved, but we may see them again. Okay, we're going to get to the final item on our agenda, which is an update on the 25-26 school year. Maggie, Sophie, and Maggie, you are recognized.
I do think it's funny that we sat by each other. Yeah. We probably shouldn't have done that. I will provide some quick oversight updates for schools within our portfolio. First, I know we've talked a lot about site visits in our presentation today, so I'll just give you a quick overview of how site visits function as part of our oversight and monitoring policy 3.300. So this policy mentions that the commission shall conduct at least one annual site visit per year for each school within our portfolio. Site visits include classroom observations, stakeholder interviews with parents and teachers and students and school leadership and the governing board. We schedule all site visits as a half day, as Tess mentioned, to try to alleviate administrative burden where at all possible, particularly for schools who are well performing. However, we will do a full day site visit if it's in a high stakes review year, such as an interim or renewal. If the school serves, and we've run into this more recently, a large number of grades. So if they're a K-8 or like a 6-12, that just requires longer site visits for us to be able to conduct all the classroom observations and interviews. And then the other piece is that if the school is under any sort of intervention or warrants additional time, we may do a full day for further investigation there. So our schools who are under intervention, in most cases, will receive a full day site visit. We have completed all of our semester 1 site visits and are well into semester 2. So I just want to provide you some general highlights based on our findings from these visits. First, our schools overall have really strong school culture and good student engagement. Across the board, we see students that are happy to be at school, that are joyful, and that are engaged in their learning. We also see schools that are operating in alignment with the mission and the model that they set out to do. That is something that we materially talk about at site visits, is their progress towards their mission-specific goal and looking at the academic model that they set out to accomplish and seeing it in action. Some continued challenges, which honestly most of these we've already talked about, is staffing. Staffing continues to be a challenge across all of our schools. Many are operating with staffing vacancies that affect things like leadership capacity, coaching, professional development for teachers. We see it in some instances if their staffing vacancies are with teachers providing services for students or EL students. Provision of services are often disrupted, and then staff to EL student ratios are off. But again, our schools are doing much of what they can to alleviate staffing concerns. However, I do think that it is a continued challenge that we're seeing not only nationally, but for our schools as well. I do also want to talk about performance review letters. This is something that we provide our schools twice a year, and that is in alignment with the organizational performance section of our school performance framework. These letters are sent to executive directors and governing board chairs. They're sent in November and April. The letters include progress towards indicators within the organizational performance section, really aiming to provide transparency for operators to allow them the opportunity to fix any items that may be out of compliance early on in the school year, so that by the time that we're rolling up their framework at the end of the school year, they're able to address the concerns. Some items that I think are worth mentioning, these are just areas of focus that came out of completing these letters in November. Some things that we've seen across the board are issues with credentialing and enrollment variance. So when we look at credentialing, as of January 9th, 11 of 24 schools were off track for this indicator. Now, credentialing on the surface does not mean that they're operating with unlicensed teachers. A lot of the issues that we're seeing with teacher credentialing are teachers who are like enrolled in an educator prep program and they're waiting on paperwork, or we have teachers who are waiting to take praxis exams to finalize their paperwork, or we have some instances in which teachers are licensed teachers, but they're teaching out of their endorsement area. So they may be teaching a class that they're not fully endorsed for yet, and they're working on that certification. I do want to note that we provide this to our schools as, you know, kind of like a fact check. Where here's what we're seeing in our systems. These are your unlicensed teachers or things that need to be fixed. If they fix them by the second letter in April, they absolutely can meet standard by the end of the year on the framework. The other piece is enrollment variance. This is another challenge, and as of November 1st, 8 out of 24 schools are off track for this indicator. This is looking at schools' actual enrollment compared to the projected enrollment in the school's June 1 budget. Some schools who had greater variances were provided the opportunity to submit updated budgets by January 1, which 2 schools chose to do. But schools are updating their budgets again in March, which just provides us a clear look at how schools are trending towards their projected enrollment. Now, speaking of enrollment, I will talk about enrollment for our new schools. You can see here that there is some variance with our schools that opened under the commission this year. We are continuing conversations with Empower, Memphis, Career, and College Prep. And we meet frequently with them. And Sophie, in her pre-opening updates, can talk a little bit more about how some of our new schools are doing if you have further questions around this. We also have here enrollment for our expanding schools. So these are schools that are adding grade levels. And you can see the projected and actual enrollment there for this school year. The last item that I'd like to present on and talk about is governing board engagement. We prioritize attending year one schools board meetings in the fall to address any initial challenges that we're seeing. So one of those things is enrollment. I think that these board conversations focus a lot on accountability systems, their school performance that they have thus far, any data that we have to share. As Rebecca mentioned, we do provide the time and model analysis to them where applicable as well. The boards have expressed appreciation for our transparency with the data that we provide, and then upcoming visits with established governing boards will shift focus towards the data that we have available from last school year, and just general reminders around accountability. And with that, I will turn it to Maggie, the other Maggie.
Good afternoon. Maggie Stampley, Director of School Programs and Supports. In direct alignment with the Commission's strategic plan, the School Programs and Support team is committed to providing effective operational support in addition to rigorous oversight and guidance. The frequency of the oversight and guidance for our schools is established through an annual conducting of the risk assessment in the late spring each year. I'm hoping this will address some of the questions earlier about the level of support we're providing for each of the schools. This past spring, we conducted our second round of the risk assessment. Examples of data that we collect to determine tiers are things such as the numbers of years of experience for leaders in schools, the size of a special populations group, submission rates from schools for required documents, and special populations assessment performance results. Results of the risk assessment determine the level of support and monitoring that we, as a school programs team, provide the following school year. It's important to note that all year one schools are automatically assigned to Tier 3 to ensure they're provided with the highest level of support and monitoring. We use this data, as well as data collected from monitoring, to determine tier levels. Examples of support and monitoring looks like the frequency of required desktop and in-person audits, frequency of required departmental check-ins, and frequency of site monitoring. Last year, we saw 89.5% of tier assignments were maintained or decreased. This indicates a decrease of commission monitoring and support. 10.5% of tier assignments were increased, indicating an increase of commission support and monitoring for the school year. In addition to tiered level of support and monitoring, the school programs team has provided 12 trainings for the 25-26 school year. The school programs team sought feedback from stakeholders in June, which resulted in the determination of topics for technical assistance. One area of significant interest was a desire for more training on safety and security. As a result, a survey was sent out in October to gather more data to determine additional supports and future training opportunities in this area. At the current time, our portfolio of schools has a wide range of different types of security services, as you can see on the screen. At this current time, we have 3 full-time SROs, 1 part-time SRO, 14 armed private security guards, 6 unarmed private security guards, and 4 schools with no security guards.
Sorry, could you remind me what SRO means?
An SRO is a school resource officer who is a member of the police force. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A noted barrier is that 20 out of our 24 schools do not have assigned SROs. When speaking to law enforcement, it is noted that this is due to staffing, and that the hope is that there are enough hired officers to be able to have all schools filled within the next 3 years. Also, as a result of the survey, there was a high interest from schools for more training when it comes to handling mental health crises, as well as overall basic crisis management. This fall, the commission has established relationships with MNPD, School Safety Division, the Mid-Cumberland and East Tennessee Homeland Security agents. We've worked alongside both regional safety consultants to ensure clear communication and improve security practices. We've partnered with the TDOE to provide all school leaders with the training on averting targeted school violence and hope to do the same with Homeland Security on conducting high-quality threat assessments once their trainings have been finalized. A meeting has been set up to ensure that the district-level safety team is established for school year 27-28, and that all feedback provided on emergency operation plans can be implemented and improved heading into the next school year.
Quick question for you. On the armed private security, are those post-certified, or are they just, do they just have their bonding and everything that for the school, and do they have any training with the local law enforcement to handle any instances that may come up on campus?
I'm happy to get you the actual, there are many regulations when it comes to the armed security guards on campuses. We actually have to do an attestation to say that our schools they all have the correct credentialing. I don't believe they have to have training with law enforcement, but I'm going to double check on that and come back to you. But there are certain requirements that they must have in order to be hired at a school.
Your 12 sessions, how impactful do y'all survey the schools on those?
Yeah, so the 12 sessions it ranges from, we have office hours frequently, but we also have some that are just IEP paperwork and how to complete it, right? Some are required, some are not required. We also have, not quarterly, monthly check-ins with our schools, with our departments, and so we receive feedback frequently, work really closely with each school's special populations department, which are usually the groups that we're targeting in these trainings, but we're working as a agency to come up with more formalized ways of gathering feedback to make sure that our trainings are effective and that people are getting what we want out of them.
Yeah, and just to add on, like, we're already planning for next school year. I think we've identified some trainings that are best done in person. So identifying times where we're going to be in Memphis to bring people together, in Nashville to bring people together. When's the right time to do X training? Like, those are all things that we're talking about right now to then figure out, okay, is what a year one schools need versus an experienced operator versus, a single site versus a network. We're really trying to make sure, what are the trainings they need? Do the right people show up to the training? And is it the right level of detail at the right time, right? And so it's a constant kind of, how do we meet people where they are?
And then on the issue of children's mental health, it's something that's continuing to just explode. We can't keep up with it, just to be honest with you. So are any of our schools currently, have they received any of the funding or applied for any of the grants through the K-12 Mental Health Trust Fund that is available for some of these things that would relate around mental health through the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse?
That is not one that I'm aware of anyone having. I will double check.
Just know there's a $250 million pot of money that the General Assembly set aside for the K-12 Mental Health Trust Fund. And they just put out this last year, there was $4 million released for guidance counselors' offices and stuff to be able to get some of the stuff for having those tools in the school system.
You're always helpful. In fact, on that happy note, I'm going to ask you to meet with afterwards so that you two can share your information, because I think this is something that we need to provide to our schools. I think it's not necessarily well known. So you're immensely helpful.
The commissioner of DCS didn't know about it. I would say no.
Yeah, I would say no too. So anyway. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from this section? All right, thank you all very much. This is very helpful. I particularly appreciate we've got one.
Yeah, do. And it's something that, in fact, Tess suggests that you and the staff talk about. I think that we've seen when we've gone out to and to look at having particularly conversations in Memphis and other cities where we've had dinners, okay, with board members or with senior staff. I think that those have been beneficial, particularly from a relationship development. And relationships, everything. Leadership's everything. So again, I speak more as a business person. I'm not an educator. So that's just really, really critical. And I'm thinking that one of the thoughts, or one of the ideas here, and as we move forward in terms of continued building on relationships and working with leadership, we got 9,000 scholars. I forget how many schools now, 27 that we in fact, again, have oversight? Whatever that number is. But having, again, a half day or full session with the key leadership, with the board, and with, again, staff, because at the end of the day, it is important to listen to the voice of the customer. And then, since those are our customers. So something to ponder on, something that I'm going to throw out as a thought. And if we're talking about pulling 26 school leaders and maybe their support person, whoever their second in command is, and then the board chairs, whether that's during the summer, I think truly most of us would be willing to make the sacrifice to do that. But if it's in the school year, I think that something that we do on an annual basis to look at from an objective standpoint, building relationships, listening to the voice of our customer to hear what, in fact, is issues that we as a board on the same level should really, in fact, know about in terms of their challenges and their opportunities. That really might be something that, in fact, has some real significant impact. We know how it's been where, you had Eddie hugging and kissing on people as he was leaving, dinner when we were in Memphis. It was concerning. It really was. I said,
What did I do?
So you need to kind of hands relation, arm's length relationship. But I just think that the issue of, again, as I said,
Let me text my wife and say, Michael lost his mind.
what's new? I mean, you think. So anyway, I think you get my point. So think about it. You guys talk among yourselves. Ladies, talk about yourselves, and gentlemen, and see if that's something we might want to look at doing maybe this year.
Or maybe just one additional a question relates to the safety and security survey. To what extent are we thinking about not just physical security, but cybersecurity and even things related to, there's a lot of schools that are considering going off smartphones for a variety of reasons, and just thinking about the full range of information security topics, whether that's related to the safety of children or it's related to the safety and security of information. Again, I don't know how often that's coming up, but just curious, are we thinking about extending this survey and the work we do beyond, or you are doing beyond physical security to cybersecurity and safety?
Yeah, a couple of different things that kind of address that. One is I'm incredibly grateful for the team at the department. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They update their resources frequently. And they're very relevant, and there are a ton of things with cybersecurity coming out specifically for students. There's also, Hayden probably can speak a lot better to it than I can, but there's legislation coming out where next year, I know all students are going to have cybersecurity training in a classroom, right? So there's different things that are coming out to help students be aware of that and to increase it. I think one thing we have seen is an increase when it comes to a lot of student discipline that is stemming from technology. And that has been something that's been happening in schools and something we've been working through. And so I think we're just at the beginning of this journey, but that's been a hot topic, I would say.
And I would just say all schools are complying with the statute around the requirement that cell phones are not. That's something that all schools are now have passed the cell phone policy, or not allowing it in instructional time, et cetera. And I think that's making a significant difference. But that we're still seeing cyber bullying, harassment issues outside of the school setting.
So let me ask this question, following up on that. From my time serving on STS and the Information Systems Council, I know the comptroller routinely looks at, schools, even their Wi-Fi networks. Are we for sure that all of our schools are meeting all of the requirements to lock those down so there can be no cyber intrusion into data systems that could put students' FERPA information at risk so that there's no finding from the comptroller's office on those issues?
We are not going to that level of
Okay.
information. I will tell you from a staff perspective, that is not something that we are doing, but, yeah. Chairman Carter asked about vaping. And anecdotally, Maggie, if you want to speak to kind of any of the discipline issues we're seeing around the vape.
Yeah, so Ashley, hop in if you have anything to add. We spend a lot of time on these topics. Vaping is become essentially a pandemic for our students. It's a very challenging thing that our schools are up against. Another thing to note that in the state of Tennessee, if a student is in possession of a vape that has marijuana, it is considered zero tolerance. So it is a automatic 180-day expulsion, unless it's a student with an IEP. So it has become, not only is it a issue that schools are facing, but it also can become a hurdle for students when they are found with that in possession or they make that choice.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I want to thank all the members of the commission.
We have a couple of pre-opening updates, and then we're done. Fast.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
we've got two more things. Okay. I'm sorry, I've been having so much fun, I lost track of time.
I'm Sophie Binnenfeld-Gilmore. I'm the authorizing coordinator, and with that, I run our pre-opening process. So we have officially kicked off our pre-opening process for our next cohort of schools, and that started in November. We have 3 schools-ish undergoing the pre-opening process this year. I say ish because Rocketship Tennessee 4, which will be in Rutherford, has notified us that they will be delaying until 2027. They have secured a facility. They just want to make sure they have ample time to do renovations and drum up recruitment, and we are in full support of this decision. So the other 2 schools that will be opening in school year 2026-27 are the Rock Academy and Jackson Museum School. Both of these schools have multiple viable facility options that they are deciding between. They understand the urgency needed in order to secure a facility so they can begin recruitment, but they both fully intend to open on time in August of 2026. The next update I wanted to give is just a quick overview of our pre-opening process that we kicked off in November. The first is we have monthly meetings one-on-one with the operator to discuss updates on the pre-opening process and items within their pre-opening checklist and their ready-to-open criteria. We also provide monthly best practice presentations with different members of the LEA team regarding topics of interest, such as data, enrollment, special populations, accountability, and the school performance framework. We encourage governing board members to attend some specific presentations as well. And with that, now you can continue.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments for your section? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody's participation. I know this has gone long, but I think it'll help us tomorrow as we face trying to move through a long agenda. And yet I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to ask their questions and understand the important things included in this agenda. I also want to thank Commissioner Smith for his willingness to, on an ad hoc basis, serve on this committee. And the next meeting of the School Performance and Accountability will be April 16th. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I'll second it.
Support.
We're in for it. Okay, we are going to take a break until 3:45 to let everyone stretch their legs and do whatever. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. My goal is to be double the time of our last committee meeting. I'm kidding. All right, welcome to the January 22nd, 2026 meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. Hayden, please call the roll.
Commissioner Levine, Commissioner Marino, and Chair Smith.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Levine previously notified us of his absence, and he's excused per commission policy. On today's agenda, we have several commission policy updates presented by General Counsel Ashley Thomas. First, an update to Commission Policy 3.400 on first reading, followed by Commission Policies 1.200, 2.000, 2.100, 2.200, 2.300, 3.300, 3.500, 3.600, and 3.900 on first and final reading. And finally, Policy 3.710 on final reading. Do any commissioners have questions or comments before we vote to approve the agenda?
Can we have you read those backwards? I'm just kidding.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda? I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The agenda is approved. The minutes of the committee meeting held on October 8th, 2025 has been provided. Does anyone have any edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed? Not, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the October 8th, 2025 meeting?
Motion to approve.
I'll second. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. First on our agenda is Commission Policy 3.400 on first reading, presented by General Counsel Ashley Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Smith. This is the Commission's Charter School Intervention Policy. This was discussed during the SPA committee meeting. This policy is updated to align to TDOE requirements for schools that are federally or state designated, including the priority schools. If we have specific questions beyond the discussion from the last committee, we can take those now if there are additional edits, but if not, this is ready for a recommendation from this committee.
Thank you, Ashley. Any additional comments before we recommend adoption of Commission Policy 3.44 on first reading? Or, sorry, 3.400. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion's approved. Next on our agenda are Commission Policies 1.200, 2.000, 2.100, 2.200, 2.300, 3.300, 3.500, 3.600, and 3.900 on first and final reading. Ashley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So Commission Policy 1.200, it removes some duplicative language that occurs in another policy, so this is just cleanup. Commission Policy 2.000, we are clarifying the reconciliation language. Again, more cleanup. This is after review for commission policies for the year. Commission Policy 2.100, 2.200, 2.300, 3.300, and then I'll jump down and say 3.900. These are being updated to reflect the 2025 legislative session that sort of changed some of the process of how appeals work, that moved some of the work from the department to the state board and to the commission. And so the updates there are reflected in these policies. Let's see. Commission Policy 3.500, we are updating to reflect commission business practices of holding public comment periods in our public hearings from 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And so we're just making the language match what we actually do. And then Commission Policy 3.600, there are changes that there are references within this policy. And part of the commission's work, we have to make all of our documents ADA compliant. And because when we made those documents compliant, there was some misalignment in the language, and so we're cleaning that up with this policy. And I can take any questions from the committee.
Any questions?
Quick question, if I may.
Yeah, please. Commissioner Smith?
Ashley, can you just, on Policy 1.200, I see here on page 2 that the election of officers has been struck. We think that moved somewhere. Where did that move? None of us can remember.
Yes, that is in Commission Policy 1.100.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can we go to a alphanumeric numbering system so we can make this a little easier to keep up with?
I'll take that on motion from the committee.
Any other questions or comments before recommending adoption of those commission policies, that long list? All right, if not, is there a motion to approve? I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion's approved. The final item is Commission Policy 3.710 on final reading. Ashley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Again, this is the Opportunity Public Charter School Framework that was discussed in SPA Committee. Just to remind this committee, the adjustments between first and final reading were the adjustments to the time and model analysis, as well as the addition of the post-secondary career readiness as part of the framework. If there are additional questions, we can take those now, but if there are no questions, it's ready for a recommendation from this committee.
Any questions or comments? All right, do we have a motion? All right, second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion's approved. All right, that's it, right? Okay. Well, thank you for your attendance and participation at this meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Governments Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. Are there any final comments from any commissioners? Nope.
I'm going to talk just so you're not shorter than the business operating.
The next meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee is scheduled for April 16th, 2026. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Is that a record?